Thank you all for being here. My name is Chuck Warpahusky. I am part of the team at the Michigan Collaborative to End Mass Incarceration. Welcome to this session of our public safety and incarceration prevention learning community. We had an amazing season last year of different groups working, sharing how they are taking various steps to help improve public safety and also prevent incarceration in the first place. And we are back for season 2. And since it is September, we are starting it off with a back to school season. So the way this usually works for folks who aren't familiar, we do our learning community themes in 2-month blocks. This month, we will be hearing from a great set of panelists, 4 panelists from 3 different organizations sharing their work. They'll share a presentation a little bit for that. We'll have some time at the back after they share their presentation for Q&A and small group discussion with the presenters. And then next month, we will have a session that is almost all small group discussion. So that's really the chance for you to go deep on the topic, listen to the speakers, and also share your own experience. What are you seeing in your community? What are you seeing working? Where are the challenges that you're facing? This would not be possible if it were not for the amazing crew of organizations that brings this all together, including Emergent Justice. Elisheva Johnson from Emergent Justice is one of our panelists today. Friends of Restorative Justice started Washtenaw County. They just went statewide using restorative justice to help solve problems and prevent incarceration. The Detroit Justice Center doing amazing movement lawyering and systems change work based out of Detroit, but affecting the whole state, and Michigan Collaborative to End Mass Incarceration. I gave you the breakdown of what we'll be covering today. I'm going to get through this welcome and introductions, and then we'll get to our panel. And this is booked for an hour and a half. We understand if you are not able to make the whole time, that's okay. I'm going to drop the slides in the chat so that if you do have to bounce early, you can do that. And I'm also going to drop in the chat the link to our feedback survey. So if you do need to leave early, we still want your insight and feedback on how this all went. So that's the plan for today. Any questions on that? Excellent. So community agreements, many of you are familiar with how this goes. We want you to respect each other, but also respect yourself. Be present. This is a community. So feedback and interaction is welcome. Raise your hand if there's something to say, drop it in the chat. We'll be watching the chat so our speakers don't get distracted by it, but we do want your participation. What I've learned is plans are essential, but we never go to plan. So as things come up, please be flexible with us. We might have different perspectives, different opinions about how to address public safety and prevent incarceration. We're going to respect those differences. We're going to try to learn from each other, and we don't have to all agree, but we can all try to learn from each other and understand. If you're somebody who tends to speak a lot, maybe step back a little bit and make room for other voices. If you're somebody whose brain is churning with ideas or questions or insights, but you sometimes keep those to yourself, we're inviting you to share those and make sure that we can all learn from the great thoughts you're having. And finally, for community agreements, we're going to ask that we respect the mic and just have one speaker at a time. Anything that we need to add to those community agreements for today's session, or any questions about any of them? Excellent. So this learning community, we've got 4 goals that are bringing us together. What we realized is there are amazing people across Michigan doing incredible front-end work to improve public safety and prevent incarceration, but often they felt very alone. They felt very siloed. So this is a chance to try to build that supportive community where we can connect with each other, we can strategize together, we can share resources and tactics, right? So if there's something that's worked for you to get over barriers with the school board, work around obstruction, get buy-in from various stakeholders, we want other people to be able to share and learn from your wisdom. So that peer support is important. And then as we're getting to state and national issues, right, how do we align and come together across the state to move some of these policies forward beyond just the local level? And how do we connect each other within the Michigan and broader so that we are able to share resources, share perspectives, and share opinions? So that's what it's all about. I'm glad you're here. This community would not work without all of your participation, and I'm so glad you're part of it. We always like to do a quick, because some people do need to go early, we'd like to give an update around some of the events before we get into the panel. And those are in the link, and we're also dropping them in the chat. On November 21st, we're going to have a session, a communications convening about ethical storytelling. There are groups like Delta Project that do amazing work on sharing the voices of people who are directly affected by the criminal legal system, but it's something that needs to be done with care. And so what have we learned about how to do that storytelling effectively? What about compensation? How do we respect boundaries? What happens when boundaries change? Somebody's comfortable in one setting, but not another. So that'll be a learning conversation for folks who are part of communications efforts. On October 16th, there's going to be a second look legislation, 2 events on second look want to highlight. Nation Outside, AFSC, and other groups are doing a second look session in Detroit on October 16th. And November 12th on second look legislation, there's going to be a rally in Lansing to try to get that legislation passed after the election. I love talking about second look, but I know today is not the focus for that, so I'm going to keep us moving. I mentioned the request for you to share your feedback. Mark your calendar. Our next session, that learning community of this learning community, is going to be on October 23rd. And if you are interested in learning any resources about what's going on, we've got a resource document. And then, oops, this is a quick thing, and this is a last minute addition to our lineup here. One of the things related to youth in schools is that there was recently a big package of legislation to try to improve things within our juvenile justice system. Delta Project was one of the leaders in that effort, as was Michigan Center for Youth Justice. One of the parts of that proposal was to make it so that any, as juvenile courts are making their decisions, it's not just about the bias of the judge or whether or not he or she had breakfast that morning and what mood they're in, to have a more formalized screening process so that young people who are in that system are able to be in the most supportive, least restrictive place that fits for them. Unfortunately, the screening tool that was selected by the State Court Administrative Office is one that has very well documented racial bias. And so a number of the entities who are part of championing it are also saying, whoa, 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 this isn't the right one to choose. And so Michigan Center for Youth Justice has put out an organizational sign-on letter to try to address that. So if you are an authorized representative of an organization that can sign on, please follow through with that link. And if you're curious about more, there was a Bridge Michigan article that dropped earlier this week about that. And as Susan's pointing out, the deadline is soon because it's scheduled to be implemented beginning of next month. Thank you for that, Susan. All right. Enough with the preliminary stuff. We have an amazing panel for you today. It's not tonight, getting ahead of myself. We have an amazing panel for you this afternoon. First up, we are going to have Cassie Atallah from End Seclusion and Restraint, talking about policies that happen in schools and where that school to prison pipeline often starts right there in the classroom, right there in the principal's office, and how parents and communities across Michigan are mobilizing to try to change those policies, especially for, obviously, especially for young people, but especially for even more vulnerable young people, because often this is applied to people who are neurodivergent and on the spectrum. Following that, we're going to sort of move forward with the criminal legal system. And Elisheva Johnson from the Emergent Justice, amazing Elisheva from Emergent Justice, is going to talk about their work to address coercive police interrogation practices. Often those seeds that are planted in the schoolroom and the principal's office end up with kids getting involved with the police. And sometimes the practices, especially an interrogation technique called Raed interrogation, puts kids in a vulnerable position where they are coerced without proper support, with really manipulative tactics to confess, sometimes to things they didn't even do. And so Elisheva is going to talk about the work there to address coercive interrogation of youth. And then sometimes, sadly, that path that starts in the classroom continues with police does end up with kids who are in the juvenile justice system. And so Cole Williams and Bilal Al-Raed will be sharing the work of Delta Project, one, to support and work with kids who are in the juvenile justice system, but then also through their podcast and media work to change the narrative and uplift the voices of the people who are directly affected in the juvenile justice system. It's an amazing panel. I am going to get out of the way, stop my screen share, and hand the reins over to Cassie so that she can share her piece. Cassie, I'm going to let you get started because it's going to take me a second to find that stop share button.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chuck, for the intro, and thanks for having me. I am here with EndSaR, so Michigan Advocates to End Seclusion and Restraint. And I'm talking about seclusion and restraint in the K-12 school system. So let's see. Just a little bit of background about me. I started off my career as a teacher at Hopkins High School. I taught for 10 years in high school and spent most of my adult life on the west side of the state in Holland. But I grew up in northern Michigan, spent some time in the UP, and I was born in Mount Clemens on the east side. So I have roots all over Michigan. But I'm here because of my son. And my son, pictured here, was 6 years old and in first grade when I went to go pick him up in 2019, and I was handed a bag of wet clothes and told that he had spent some time in the time away room today. Now, the time away room was something that he spent time in an average of every day of school that year. And I hadn't seen it at this point, but I had asked about it, and I was told it was a calming place, a sensory room where he could go to calm down. Having taken him to occupational therapy, I had a visual in my head of what a calming sensory room would look like, and it had soft swings, beanbag chairs, pillows, low lighting, calm music, maybe some books, things that would be calming to children. And they said that he had an accident that day, which was startling to me because he had been potty trained since he was before preschool. Well, the next day in the debriefing meeting, I was told that he had asked to go to the bathroom, but they told him he wasn't calm enough. And so he wasn't allowed to go to the bathroom and forced to urinate on himself by the caregivers at school. And these were well-meaning adults. They thoroughly believed that he could calm down if he chose to. He was doing this on purpose, and he needed to understand that these were the rules and this behavior needed to be nipped in the bud. But the reality is he was not able to calm himself down. And so this was just one of many, many incidents that he had. It wasn't until a couple months later when I went to pick him up from school that I actually got to see what the time away room actually looked like, and it was nothing like what I was picturing. It was a small room, 3 feet by 4 to 6 feet, concrete walls that were painted, bright fluorescent lights, hard industrial carpet, nothing calming in the room, nothing soft or comfortable. There was a door and it had a thin, narrow window, but it was covered on the outside, all except for the very top, so the adults could see in, but my son couldn't see out. This is traumatizing to kids. This is a form of solitary confinement, and solitary confinement in incarcerated populations, as many of you know, has been shown to lead to increased aggression, deteriorated mental health states, increased incidence of suicide, and many, many other negative impacts. There's no reason we shouldn't think that this has similar impact on our children with developing brains who are struggling with trauma and developmental disabilities. Equally traumatic is the restraints that limit children's body movements. So they take away their bodily autonomy in these very vulnerable moments. Now, the three major problems with seclusion and restraint is that kids aren't getting their needs met when these are being used. They're being harmed, and it's part of the school to prison pipeline. What we know when students are having these big behaviors, these confusing behaviors, is that they have needs that are not being met. There are lagging skills, things they don't understand how to do, problems that they don't know how to solve, systematic barriers, limiting beliefs, and the adult expectations placed on them outweigh their resources to meet them. The adult job in these situations are to teach those skills, help them collaboratively solve those problems, meet their needs, break down barriers, help change beliefs, and adjust the expectations so that the students can be successful. When seclusion and restraint and other punitive discipline like suspension, expulsion are used, these kids are being deprived of having these needs met. And even more startling is that this is a potentially deadly force. Many of you know about Cornelius Fredericks, who died in 2020 at 16 as a result of a restraint, but he's not our only one. Earl Smith was a 9-year-old who died in 1995 in Michigan, and Michael Renner Lewis was 15 in 2003 when he died as a result of a restraint. These need to be respected as potentially deadly force. Just last year, we had an elementary student whose vertebrae was broken by being shoved into a seclusion room. So this is a big deal. It's traumatic. And, you're talking about not just physical safety, but emotional, social, and mental safety as well. And it's part of the school to prison pipeline. So you think about the messages that are being relayed to these students when they're having these big emotions that are resulting in these aggressive meltdowns. The message that they're getting when things like seclusion and restraint, suspension, expulsion are used is that your feelings and problems are too big for the adults around you to help. When you have these big feelings, you belong away from us, locked up somewhere apart from the rest of society. And peers are being, led to believe that they're safer when the kids who are struggling are locked away. And they may see their friends struggle and then, they disappear. So what if I have a hard time? That's scary for our children. But it also models for our kids how to use coercion, force, deprivation of needs to get others to comply with their demands, because that's what is being done to them. And kids learn through modeling. What we know is that adults play a way bigger role than previously thought. Trauma is almost universal in these populations. Relationship is key. These kids need to feel safe, wanted, connected. When seclusion and restraint are used, the ability for them to feel safe, wanted, connected is almost, completely eliminated. These kids are very hypersensitive. The model that we're using in school is triggering, and we need to think about safety in all forms. There are lots of alternative methods out there. There's tons of extensive research that shows other ways we can handle this. And this quote by Maya Angelou I love, but do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. And we can do better. What we know is our compliance-based systems that have punitive exclusionary discipline shove kids further into defense mode, hypervigilance, fight, flight, and eventually freeze. That harsh tone, authoritative, shaming, demands for compliance, loss of rewards or points, punishments. You better do this or else that's going to happen, these threats. What we need to do is push kids further into safety. That's going to help them be regulated, engage, and learn, and be able to redo and make better choices. So things like empathy, understanding, mirroring their emotions, not ignoring them, lowering their demands. You're a good kid having a hard time. I can help you through this. Those are the messages that we need to send. Michigan in 2016-17 did pass a law to restrict the use of seclusion and restraint. So it was only a last resort emergency situations. They were supposed to collect data. Unfortunately, these laws are not having the impact that they were supposed to be having. In Michigan, seclusion and restraint are used an average of 121 times every day, and it's not getting any better. Seclusion itself is something that is not endorsed by a single trauma-informed evidence-based practice, and yet it's used 11,780 times last year alone. This is a huge problem in Michigan. We have 33 districts that report using seclusion and restraint an average of at least every school day. And some of these center-based programs are talking like, 5-6 times a day. This is not okay. And we have some counties that are using it really disproportionately, like Ottawa and Washtenaw, that have 3% of the state's children, but are using 8 and 9% of the seclusions in the state. So what do? There's a lot of bad news, but what's the good news? Okay, well, there's a lot we can do. We can look at this from all directions, top down, bottom up, from the inside, from the outside. There's a document that I shared with lots of resources about what we're doing, about student advocacy, educator support, caregiver education, legislative change, and quality control. We offer programs for schools. Just in the summer, we worked with Hazel Park, just shining a light on their numbers, making sure their school boards are aware. And they were able to pass a plan, and now they have an oversight team that is working to reduce seclusion and restraint in their districts. So it can be done. It is being done. And this fall, we are focusing on Genesee ISD. So if you know any folks from Genesee ISD who have some stories about students who have been secluded or restrained or have punitive punishments, especially if they're in schools that are run by the ISD, we really need you to come forward and help us understand what's going on, because we can come in from the outside to communities and help build these programs, but the real secret sauce happens when people from the inside and outside can collaborate and work together. And so we need people from Genesee ISD schools to work with us here. But we offer parent guides, educator support guides, and if you're interested in joining us, we have a fall campaign. You see our website up there, and you can join us in the breakout groups to learn more. So thank you so much, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you so much, Cassie. We've got a couple minutes left. Cassie was more to the point than I was, so thank you for that, Cassie. Any questions or comments for Cassie before we hand the mic over to Elisheva? I just have a quick question, Cassie, on the data you shared. When we're looking at the prison system, one of the problems many of our members face is that the underreporting of critical incidents. So for example, at Baraga, they say there's been no critical incidents over the last 2 years, when from a variety of other sources, we know there have been. I know it's hard to measure what you're not even seeing, but how much do you think the data that you shared are underreported, and how much seclusion and restraint is happening off the books?
It varies a ton. Like some of these schools are reporting very diligently, and I believe some of the highest numbers are actually influenced by very diligent reporting. We have like 75% of schools who report zeros. My son's school never reported a single one of his to the state. So his school always reported zero. So we know it absolutely is underreported. We don't know how underreported it is, and it varies so much by districts, but yes, underreporting, since there's no state level oversight, there's no auditing of numbers at all. There's not even somebody to tap the schools on the shoulder and say, you reported zero, but we've had a complaint, and that doesn't seem to match, or your numbers are excessively high. There's no one doing any of that. So we know that this data really doesn't match very closely the reality on the ground.
Thank you so much for that, Cassie. Any other quick questions before? Okay, and Kim added in the chat, he asks, did your son's school change, and if so, how?
I actually don't know, because I ended up pulling my son out. When he started talking about wanting to die as a first grader, I realized that it was a matter literally of life or death for him. So I pulled him out. I did try several times to talk to them about, here's the methods that work for me at home. they were not able to incorporate any of the collaborative and proactive solutions, declarative language. They just, they were very much in the mindset that the methods I was using at home must be enabling him. And I think they put a lot on, this is bad parenting and he needs better discipline. I don't think they could be open to some of the change that needed to happen at that point. And we've kind of moved on from that school, so I haven't seen any change, no.
As many people in chat are saying, that's so heartbreaking. So Cassie, I really appreciate it. We were talking before the call that you've been able to find a better school for your son that he's thriving in now. So we're happy for you and for him. And I'm so grateful that you're continuing the work to make sure that we can stop other kids having to go through what your son went through.
Yeah, I do think that's important to say is there are other schools who have changed. This can be done. There are healthy environments. My son is in a very extremely healthy environment, and schools who have made the change have also noticed, better staff satisfaction, staff retention, fewer injuries, and these are all things that we desperately need in Michigan. So this benefits not only students and families and communities, but also educators. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And Liz is asking in the chat for the background for the stats. So if you can send, if you've got something that you can drop in the chat, great. If not, send that to us and we'll share it with the learning community when we send out the background materials. Thank you for that question, Liz. All right, next up, we have Elisheva Johnson from Emergent Justice. Elisheva, take it away.
What up, though? My name is Elisheva T. Johnson, and I am the Executive Director of Emergent Justice. We do criminal justice reform work, and we do that through something called participatory defense, which is how we found out about Reed interrogation in the first place. But I first like to tell you about who I am and a little bit of how I just got into this work. So I was about 16 years old, and I was pretty much forced because of a very violent crime. I was forced into parenthood about 7 months later. Here I was having a child, and that was never one of the things that was ever on my mind. Wasn't something that I had, of course, planned for at 16. I had just met a very broken young person who, like myself, was truly looking for support from the many systems that were missing us and misguiding us, and then a lot of times using us. So flash forward, I got into this work because of my own son who went to school on his very first day of school and got suspended. And he went into school at 3 years old because he had a learning disability and severe cognitive issues. But we were really, it was really important to us as a value for my family for him to go to public school and engage with children that were from his community. So that led me to be a very young mom advocating for him every day of the school year. In fact, when my son finally graduated, they said he wouldn't. I threw confetti all over myself because I felt as though I was graduating as well. And I had been through so many conversations, so many hard times, so many suspensions. My son was even expelled from Kalamazoo Public Schools. That really led us to where, flash forward, my son is 26 years old, and he is now being wrongfully convicted of a crime that he admitted to. And I was so floored and couldn't even understand at all why my son would do that. So my story is very much intertwined because I went through the school to prison pipeline myself and watched others, but it was just very daunting to watch my own sons in this system. And I had reached out to someone who many of you may know, who just really fought a huge battle in the sheriff's race, Alicia Dyer. I reached out to her and I was like, why would someone admit to something that they did not do? why would my son say that he did this when he called me and said he didn't do it? And me and his dad know that he wouldn't do anything like that. Like, why is this happening to us? And she explained to me that this was an actual tactic that was used that was called Reed interrogation. And Reed interrogation is it's a coercive and deceptive tool that is used in our schools. And in schools, they might call it questioning, but they're actually really teaching our school administrators these techniques. And often the system uses the question students it's this Reed interrogation technique, or they use similar high pressured questioning designed to get a confession. Now, let's be very clear that Reed technique has nothing to do with the truth. It is to get the answer that the folks that are questioning want. It doesn't necessarily mean that needs to be the truth. So it's not about the truth. And Reed interrogation is the brand name. Okay, it's the brand name, like how we tend to use Pampers, like when we want to refer to diapers, right? We say Pampers, but really they're diapers. But because of the branding and branding is done so well with Reed interrogation, instead of saying interrogation, you might as well say Reed interrogation. And this technique was invented in the 1950s, y'all. And today that company's name is Reed and Associates, and they are the main trainer in the US that teaches this tactic for interview and interrogation techniques. Next slide, please. Yeah, so about 10 to 15 years ago, y'all, Reed and Associates developed a course for school principals and administrators. And this training is called Developing Investigative Interviewing Skills for School Administrators. Now, this training covers the same topics as the course that they teach our law enforcement, our police. And in Michigan, our Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals, which we call them MASSP, has offered this course to its member for many years now. And in 2016, the New Yorker quoted the MASSPS's executive director as saying that they were hosting their 20th Reed seminar. And that was over the past 11 years. So they've been doing this since 2005, y'all. So you can do the math on that. Next slide. So the reason why this presentation that we're doing is set up in this way is because most of why is because of where the research exists. There's not much, y'all. There's not much talk about how wrongfully people get wrongfully convicted. People are wrongfully convicted at all. And what Reed interrogation really, really is, it's deceptive. It is not illegal for the police to lie to us. They can tell us anything they want, and they can actually tell us falsities, like that they have forensic evidence, that someone has witnessed us doing something or seen us involved in a crime. They can lie and tell us that we failed our polygraph results, like they did my son. And they can lie to you about whether or not they can lie to you, if that makes any sense. Next slide. So coercive tactics are about how to psychologically manipulate a person that is being questioned. At its maximum usage throughout the interview, the questioner firmly asserts the person's guilt and ignores any claims that you're innocent. So you could be sitting there and explaining a story, telling your story and saying, hey, I wasn't there. I don't think anyone saw me because I wasn't there. There couldn't be any forensic evidence because I wasn't there. And they care less about what you're talking about. They begin by stating that you're guilty. They tell you their theory. They exaggerate the strength of the evidence that they have. And they can exaggerate the charges that you're facing, like they did my son. So minimization looks like, after making it clear that the claims of innocence won't be believed, the questioner downplays the seriousness of this event. And you'll hear common phrases like, hey, I just want to hear your side of the story, man. I'm just here for you. I just want to talk to you. You're not in trouble. We just want to talk to you. Everyone makes mistakes, but it's important that you man or you woman up and you tell the truth. That's what they told my son. They also told my son that they were trying to help him and that they couldn't help him if he didn't talk to them. Next slide. So why is Reed a problem? Over the past 2 decades, research has shown the following general problems with Reed interrogation are at its core. It has no want of determining real guilt. And they do this through verbal and non-verbal clues. And it's just wrong. I mean, there's a guilty person who's running out there. Meanwhile, they deem you as the one they want, and nothing you say means anything. And they just want you to confess to this thing. Reed is a problem because it's coercive and it's deceptive, and its methods can lead to confessions by both guilty and innocent people, like my son. So, as you know, these methods are the reasons behind wrongfully convicted folks. And since 1989, there's been 3,471 exonerations. 438 of these exonerations involves a false confession. I mean, one person behind bars because they're wrongfully convicted is it's just outrageous. But to think that there are 438 people that are behind bars that have lost their lives, their families, just because police wanted a confession, it's just crazy to believe. 54% of these folks were 21 years of age or younger at the time of the crime. 33% of these folks were 18 years old or younger at the time of the crime. And 87% of these young people were youth of color, and they were 21 years old or younger at the time. So this is predatory in the fact that it targets certain people. Young, brown, effectively, essentially boys are overall targets, and most of all, folks that have learning disabilities or cognitive issues. Next slide. Research has shown that juveniles are particularly likely to give false information when questioned by law enforcement officers who are using these tactics. Later on, we're going to show you how school administrators also do the same things. But you wonder, why are youth more susceptible to these tactics? And it's because their prefrontal cortex, the portion of the brain that is responsible for judge making, and I'd like to say that we've been taught that it's about 26. I'd say I know some young people who I don't think they have really good judgment and have practiced that. So not only do you have to have the use, right? You have to have it, but you have to have also practiced, right? Using good judgment and using good habits. And we know that there are not many places where nowadays our youth are being listened to or heard or valued. So if someone has decided that this young person is done something wrong, then they're going to probably go with that. And we have all the tactics that can get a confession out of a young person. So youth with learning disabilities are at increased risk. About 365 recorded exonerations involved a false confession, and they were by a person who were 18 years under, and that was 25% of the time. 35% of the time, youth who made false confessions also had a mental health or an intellectual disability. And these dangers are even greater in our schools. Next slide. As long as law enforcement is not involved before or during the questioning of a student by school personnel, the student has no legal safeguards. I'm going to say that again. Miranda does not apply. No right to remain silent or have an attorney. No right to have their parent give consent or even be notified, y'all. We have had cases that have come through our hubs where parents did not even know that their children had been questioned at all. They weren't notified. Their children weren't told that they were going to even notify their parents or ask if they wanted their parents. And they had no right to have a parent or other caring adult present for questioning. So most common law doctrine assumes that schools act in the best interest of a child in the same way that a parent would. But we know that to not be a truth. The result of that is courts have repeatedly considered statements made to school administrators as voluntary, allowing them to be used against that student in that case. And we saw that with a 6-year-old boy just here recently in schools in Wayne County. Next slide. So, how many students are referred to law enforcement, do you wonder? So, 49.2 million overall student enrollment in our country, right? Out of that, 61,900 cases were referred to law enforcement from school. And this resulted in 8,900 arrests. So you cannot tell me that we do not have a wide open pipeline to prison from schools. When people tell me, Elisheva, maybe our county doesn't actually have a school to prison pipeline. Maybe it's a cradle to prison pipeline. Oh, wait a minute. You've heard of the foster care to prison pipeline, but you mean to tell me our school district is having a school to prison pipeline problem? Yeah. Most schools in Michigan are having a problem with young students of colors entering into the criminal legal system because they're being questioned in schools. And parents don't even know about this. Next slide. So what are some solutions? Well, one of them is to make sure that your child knows that they can ask for legal representation. Providing with students with access to legal representation during interrogations can help ensure that their rights are protected and that they fully understand their potential consequences of their statements. This can help prevent coerced confessions and ensure that students are treated fairly. We can extend Miranda rights. So we can make sure that children hear that they have rights before they're questioned by anyone, even school personnel. Everyone, including parents, school administrators, advisors, students, should all understand their Miranda rights and have education in it. We believe that schools should educate students about their Miranda rights and the implications of waiving those rights during interrogations. This can empower students to make informed decisions about their interactions with law enforcement or school officials before they do it. We can have clear guidelines establishing guidelines for school interrogations, including the presence of a parent or guardian or someone they care or trust. The use of recording devices, and limitations on these questions and how and where they question them. Imagine that they've secluded a child, and then they go into that seclusion and they were to ask them questions then. That would be just trauma on top of trauma. But we've heard of this happening. We need bias training. Providing bias training for school administrators and law enforcement officers on implicit bias, cultural competence, and de-escalation techniques can reduce the likeliness of students from marginalized communities being treated unfairly or targeted by disciplinary actions or interrogations. I'll tell you that cultural understandings and different cultural ways in which people live their lives also come into that interrogation room. And there are different cultures that teach our youth that it doesn't matter what is said to you. If this person is your elder, then you do what they say. And we have to kind of understand that. And law enforcement and police and administrators need to understand that as well. Support for mental health and special needs. Schools should provide adequate support for students with cognitive disabilities and mental health issues to ensure that they are not unfairly targeted. And last but not least, but most importantly, data collection and transparency. Much like the seclusion in schools, there is not good data or people reporting out good data, because we know in certain districts that we've looked at that there are way more interrogations that lead to cases in court that they are reporting. Next slide. Or is my time over? Jen, how am I doing on time?
You are done on time, and that was also the last slide you shared with us. So thank you so much for Elisheva. I know you were focused on your speech, but the chat was absolutely blowing up with feedback from you. So really resonating with folks. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
I'm about to pass the mic over to Bilal and Cole from the Delta Project. As we do, I just want to point out we're running great conversations. We're running a little bit past our initial schedule. So I want to give you the option on if you want us to, after Bilal and Cole share, if you want to stay in just a large group conversation with everybody for this month. If that's the case, just drop a 1 in the chat. Or if you still want to have some time for small group, a little bit shorter, and we'll have, 15, 20 minutes in small group with the speakers. If that's your preference, drop a 2 in the chat. As you do that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Cole Williams, co-founder of the Delta Project, and Bilal Al-Raed, who is a former participant from Delta Project and now on their team, helping run their podcast, helping do their programs, and doing amazing work to support youth who are in the juvenile justice system, and then to reach beyond just the youth to the broader community, to shine a light onto a system that too few people are paying attention to, and to make sure that we're hearing from the experiences of those most directly impacted. So Cole and Bilal, take it away.
Yes, can you guys see my screen? Yes, perfect. So my name is Cole Williams, and what a rich conversation we are having now. I'm so thankful to be a part of this conversation today. So I am the executive director of the Delta Project, and we provide support and programming for young people that are involved in our juvenile justice system, but also at risk at finding themselves in the pathway of the juvenile justice system. And Bilal, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sorry. It's a little delay on my thing. My internet a little weird. But I'm Bilal Al-Raed, program and media specialist at the Delta Project. Also blessed to be here. Thankful to be here. It's a good day. Still feel like it's morning, even though it's the afternoon. So good afternoon to everybody. I did want to take a second to tell Elisheva that I feel for you and your son. And I hope everything goes as it should go. I know yesterday, an innocent man just got executed in Missouri, and that broke my heart. His name was Marcellus Williams. So yeah, I definitely do feel for you and your son.
So one of the things I think is important, I think as I'm listening to everyone's story, is how we got here. And so my why in this work has really been centered around my experiences as a young father, being a young father with a child born in the foster care system at the age of 16 and becoming a single father. But fast forward, finding myself as a foster parent and having a child that not only had developmental issues, but also or challenges, but also had some experiences with school systems. And I was on a crisis plan through my community mental health, and I unfortunately called 911 as a part of our crisis efforts. And that unfortunately led me down the path into the juvenile justice system, where I really struggled to understand the system itself. I knew the child welfare system, I knew the educational system from some aspects, and I really understood the community mental health system, but the juvenile justice system was a system that I was unfamiliar with. And when I called the police, I don't think that I was really fully aware of the outcome that it would lead us down. And so before you know it, I found myself in a system that I didn't have a language for. I didn't truly understand. I didn't know the judge. I didn't know any of the processes or the language that was connected to how do I get my son out of this kind of system. And it led me down to a curiosity path around who are the kids behind this system, who are the parents that are behind this system, and because of that curiosity and that wanting to understand what I was experiencing as a parent and calling the police was really a sense of desperation. I was desperate for help. I was desperate to find my son the support that he needed, and unfortunately, 911 was the only call that I was given as a way of a crisis plan to support our family. And so I found myself in that system, and I got curious and started asking questions. And before you know it, I started teaching in the juvenile detention center. And then before you know it, I started working with parents who were involved in this juvenile justice system. And I started to learn a great deal about what was happening. And I found and discovered that so much of what I had gone through was with the stories of so many parents that I walk alongside currently as we relate to the juvenile justice system. And so I'm really excited to be in this space with Bilal because that's really where I met him, and our journeys took path.
Yeah, so my journey really started. I was 13 years old when I first entered the juvenile justice system, but I feel like my journey started a little bit before that because it could have been prevented. Um, since I was young, I had a overwhelming passion for basketball, but my situation and circumstances didn't allow me to be involved in that. Nowadays, you need to do AAU and all these other different basketball programs to actually go somewhere with basketball. You can't just do school, your school team. We didn't have the resources, or I didn't have the support to be able to, afford AAU and other teams outside of school. So unfortunately, I followed the route of my peers, my brothers, and things like that, which eventually landed me in the juvenile, where I met Cole Williams at 13 years old. So um, my whole teenage life, I seen two birthdays: my 19th birthday and my 15th birthday. I never went to homecoming. I never did a prom. I never did one full year of high school, which is crazy when I think back on it. My whole teenage life, I was incarcerated. I hit puberty inside of juvenile. I grew inside juvenile. I learned a lot of behaviors inside juvenile, behaviors that um, eventually I carried out into the real world, which ended me back inside juvenile. Um, so I think I grew a passion for it. I think I grew a passion for it just sitting back and realizing all the things that I miss and all the people that I miss, because oftentimes you have friends, you got peers. Where I come from, you have friends, you have peers, and they just disappear. I know one of my best friends, I used to always think where he was, and he was just gone, like missing. And eventually I ended up finding out that he was locked up for years. And I didn't know that. And I eventually started that same cycle. Like I would have friends and they would see me, and then next thing you know, I'd be gone, I'd be missing. Um, so the Delta Project basically is how do you the epiphany of how do you become something you don't see, because they helped me see my light, and I ended up coming out different. I'm in college now, and I'm somewhere that nobody around me or nobody who knew me would ever thought I would be, and I'm thankful to be in the position I am now.
Yeah. And I think what's important to really point out is that this question is our North Star for our nonprofit, but it is a universal question, and it also is a really important question that we should all be asking, right? But for young men that find themselves involved in the juvenile justice system, for young men that find themselves experiencing adverse childhood experiences, or from marginalized communities that are resource savvy but poverty stricken, this kind of question is a really hard question. How do we become something we don't see, especially when oftentimes than not, these young men are seeing a variety of things in terms of identity and who they should become. And one of the things that we realize in working in the juvenile detention center, but also serving kids that find themselves in these communities and these environments and are trying to find themselves, is that they really need support, and support in an intentional way. But one of the way that we answer this question is why Bilal was here. I realized very early on that there is so much that one person can do, but what one person can do is major. But when you bring in lived experience young people who also know their stories really well, they can connect with young people who haven't figured out their story just yet, right? Or how to craft their story, how to tell their story. And what we realized in this is that we have been fighting against biases around how everyone sees young people of color, particularly Black boys and Black girls. And so our work around this has really become around, what do you see? So when we think about kids in our educational system, when we think about kids in our community mental health systems, when we think about kids in our education system, when we think about Black and brown kids, there is a blanketed narrative oftentimes that is on them and placed on them. And this becomes one of the things that we are often asking in these spaces, is how do you become what you don't see? But most importantly, what do people see when they see you? And so when we talk about biases and we talk about how the Delta Project has created our programming, it's really been around trying to solve this kind of problem. And this problem is really around how we tell stories, the narratives that we tell about Black boys, gets to tell their stories, the underrepresentation of the truer lived experiences and stories of Black and brown boys and girls, right? And the patterns that are painted that impact how Black and brown boys are seen in our communities, as well as receiving services from all sectors of our systems of care, right? And so these stereotypes and these discriminatory practices as well all cause barriers in terms of how young people are seen. And one of the things I can tell you, and Bilal, I think, could speak to this too, is that a lot of our young people are not seen properly, they are not heard, and they are not often valued. And so that also plays a huge impact on how they behave and how they interact with services, but most importantly, how they interact with their communities and the adults around them, right? And I think this is really the problem that the Delta Project has been working really hard to solve. And one of those ways that we talk when we talk about kiddos is a term that I think we've been working really hard is to explore, is adultification and its impact, right? And I think it's really important and imperative that we find ways to make sure that we are challenging these biases and stereotypes that really dehumanize Black and brown boys and girls across all, again, across all systems. Blau, is there anything you want to share?
Yeah, I also want to say that the adultification and the biases, it plays such a major role in ways that I didn't understand when I was going through what I was going through. And now, even now, when we go inside the schools and when we mentoring and doing different things like that, when I see them and they tell me about certain looks and certain things that teachers may say or probation officers may say, it breaks my heart. But at the same time, I think when I looked at the run of show and it said, how are we the solution? The solution I think the solution is helping them see themselves, helping them see the potential inside of them. Because as much as I would say we like to take credit and the Delta Project would like to take credit, I also want to give credit to where it's due. The kids that's doing the work. I mean, I'm seeing it firsthand when I go inside the schools, the work that they doing and the improvements that they making, and that it's 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 amazing. I'm speechless because I see it firsthand, and man, like every day I see it, and it's amazing. I wish everybody could see it.
And so to be able to, we're going to fast forward our slides, but get these to you as well, because I think we want to end and start with what Bilal is saying, right? Because we know what the problem is, right? And we know what we have to do. But I think what Bilal was speaking to is what you see right now on this first slide. And these are two of the young men that Bilal and I have worked closely with. But Bilal, if you want to talk about the Boys to Mentors program, and the work that you do, it would be great. And I'll just throw in that when I started, I was super excited to work with these young people and still am. And then when Bilal came in and he started working and walking alongside them, when I came back to work alongside them, they didn't even see me. And so the question to how do I become something I don't see was answered because they saw me, but I was positioned in the right position. I was in the backdrop. Who they needed to see was Bilal. And so Bilal, I'll let you take that away.
The Boys to Mentor program is, I'm just gonna explain it because I know we gotta be fast and move fast. So essentially, I know y'all familiar with the school to prison pipeline, the reoccurring process of when somebody goes to jail, 9 times out of 10, they end up back, statistically. We trying to take that and shift it into something way more beautiful and way more intentional with the mentoring program. We essentially mentoring these boys who become men who we want to eventually mentor other boys, boys to mentors. And it's a beautiful program. Like words can't even describe how excited I am when I step into a room with these boys. And it's amazing. Like I would never think at the age I am now, I would be like, it's crazy. Just going inside of there and seeing them. The boy on the left side, his name Dominic, and that's my man right there. I love him. I love both of them. Last year he wasn't working. He was on probation. He's telling me he was smoking every day and things like that. Now he's not smoking. He's not on probation. He's working. He finna graduate early. I'm so excited for him to graduate. I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna be there right with him. And Elijah as well. Elijah matured so much. He was a little immature when I first met him. Joked a lot. He still jokes from here and there. Smart guy, but he's working. And he's focused. He's way more focused. And I wouldn't say that I am the reason for that. I won't say that I just may have helped them see the potential inside themselves, which is beautiful. Like they know their value, they know their worth, and the growth, the tremendous growth that they had since I've seen them is amazing. And I feel like that is something that needs to be instilled. I know we often pay attention more to the guys that's getting into trouble, whether it's in school or in juvenile system. We often find services, we find different things that we can incorporate to help them once they already reach that point. But not too many people are focused on the prevention method. And I think that is something that's powerful as well that we're also doing. We're trying to prevent that. We trying to get them before they even touch there, because I feel like, well, me personally, before I even touched juvenile or things like that, it was definitely things that I could have had and received and connections I could have made before I even reached that point, before I got there, before I felt compelled to have to go a certain route. So I think showing them things and giving them breathers, and when I mean breathers, bringing them to places that they never been before, it's a breath of fresh air. Putting them in spaces and communities that looks totally different from where they from. I mean, now, like, I've been in so many different spaces where I feel like my world would have never collided if I didn't take the path that I did now. Like, just going for a coffee. I mean, it may sound so simple, but for me, I would have never grabbed a coffee and went for a walk. You know what I'm saying? So just bringing them in and giving them different things and showing them different things so they can know that it's tangible. Like we see it, social media and things like that, but if you touch it, you can attain it. And I firmly believe that.
Yeah. And just to echo what Bilal was saying, currently right now, Bilal is in our podcast space, which is titled What I Know Now. And the conversation piece around that is really exploring what have people learned along their journeys when we talk about their process in the juvenile justice system. And not just everybody, but young people. Quite oftentimes than not, there isn't a space where young people often can express what they've experienced in these really harsh environments at times, or environments where they have gained relationships with the adults in those spaces. And so we want to capture their stories and hear their stories. And Bilal is now our lead host in that podcast series. I'm currently right now in one of our partner buildings at one of our schools. Because we believe that in order to really support young people, we have to go directly to where they are. And I think for us, that is the essence of the Delta Project, is that we want to walk alongside young people by being resource brokers, finding the supports that they need, and doing everything that we can to connect them with those resources, while at the same time maintaining and sustaining relationships with them along the way. Something I just learned recently, but with an interview with Dom and Eli, is that our phone calls mattered. Our text messages mattered. And so what I want to say to anybody that's in this space is that all it really does take is one person who cares enough and open enough and has compassion enough to take the time to connect. And I think that is the key to all of the work that we are trying to do and continue to do is, and Joel is, I think Joel is somewhere in here. He is the Delta Project's co-founder. And one of the most beautiful things that he has taught me in this journey too is the ability to bridge connections and bridge relationships. And I think that if we can all continue to do that, I think that is what our kids are saying, and they need. And they need advocates to be able to bridge those resources too, so that they get the support that they deserve. And that's the Delta Project.
Thank you so much, Cole and Bilal. There's been a lot of love in the chat, a lot of love from folks doing their emojis and reactions in there. So what a great way to close the panel discussion. Folks were really clear that rather than breaking into small groups, wanted to stay in the large group and have some open discussion. So I'm just curious from anybody in the overall group, if you have questions or comments or anything else you'd like to either ask of our panelists or share with the group, go ahead and drop that in the chat now or raise your hand. All right, Elisheva, kick it off.
Oh, so I just want to say I really, really appreciate you, Bilal, and man, Cole, you are just simply amazing to have seen the light in him and really brought that out and are bringing that out in so many other youth. Emergent Justice, we started our foundation with youth. And my thing is it's been so hard for us. We advocate for youth. We do a lot of our cases are involving youth, but it's really hard to get youth to come and be a part. And I really appreciate you just giving me the words that my heart needed to hear, that I need to go to where they are. And I keep trying to do that. We're pushed out, but I love to talk to you more about how we can really get in there because they need us so badly. They need us to see them and hear them and protect them. Right, Cassie? So I just really, really appreciate the folks on this panel today. And I just, Bilal, you just give me so much hope.
Thank you so much for that, Elisheva. Kim.
Yeah, just ditto all of what Elisheva just said. I mean, all of y'all on the panels for today were amazing, and just very thankful for all of that you do. I'm wondering about folks' interaction with elected officials or folks that make decisions about how these systems are, or that are supposed to be making decisions about how these systems function. Because these are stories that I think, well, like I said in the chat, they need to go out to impacted families, but they also our elected officials need to be hearing these stories as well. And I'm wondering what's y'all's interaction with those folks and what's been your experience?
Well, I'll chime in really quick. For the space of the juvenile justice system, I really came on board right around the time when the state was doing, again, looking at changing the way that we do juvenile justice in the state of Michigan. And so I was able to join the task force for juvenile justice reform, and I have been on every committee known to man when it comes to legislation and changing the policies and the procedures of how not only detention centers provide services, but residential treatment programs, to probation standards. I mean, it has just been nonstop. And one of the things that I realized by being in the classroom and working with young people and then working with parents along the way is that change wasn't just going to happen by me working and walking alongside them. I had to find a way to get involved with policy change. And so I think that is probably one of the things I didn't foresee myself doing, but recognize that in order to really make change, you really have to be connecting with these officials and having these conversations and holding people accountable at the same time. And so I think that building those relationships has really been necessary for what the Delta Project has been able to do, and we will continue to do, which is why we have the podcast, because our next step is to, begin to hold these folks accountable, but make sure that they are doing what we said we would agree to do.
Yeah, and I want to chime in on that to say that I'm part of the Juvenile Justice Advisory Committee, and the fact that I'm actually on the committee is insane to me. Last year was when I was released, and I did 3 years. So the fact that a year ago I was in a residential facility out of state, and now I'm a part of an advisory committee that's helping advocate for change inside of the juvenile justice space speaks a lot to the change that can happen and will happen. Yeah.
And I would add that on the seclusion and restraint front, we are also, just like Cole said, you really can't do this work without getting into the legislative space. There are laws or bills that have been proposed, the Keeping All Students Safe Act at the federal level, that has been just proposed over and over and over and just can't pass. We don't have enough support. So then we kind of work at the state level, and we do have legislators, and we need to talk to them. Regina Weiss on the education committee, Stephanie Chang, they're interested, they're listening. We need a groundswell. See, we have a lot of people who are personally involved. We're not enough, guys. We're a severe majority. We need other people to care. We need the majority of people to understand and care and create a groundswell. We realize these are divergent problems: juvenile justice system, seclusion and restraint, suspension, expulsion, but the solutions are the same, right? We need to connect with young people. We need to have relationships. They need to be seen. They need to be heard. They need to feel valued, part of the community. And there are ways to do that. And we all need to keep, on these legislators, because that is a part of it. Yeah.
So
Peace and love, everybody.
Go for it.
My name is Ortegas Jackson. All I can say is, man, thank you. I don't even know how I got in this particular Zoom call today, but I seen it in my email and I jumped on it, man. And I'm telling you, this is a eye opener for me, because this is the work that I do in the city of Detroit, a youth advocate. I do a billion other things, but today we talking about our youth. And for some reason, I put in the chat that I tried to get a job at JDF just recently. And I went through the whole process. Interview went beautiful. It was a done deal. All I had to do was training. It was a 3 weeks training I want to say I had to do before I was hired. They called me at the last minute and told me, man, well, they text me. They didn't even call me. They text me and told me that they wish not to go forward with my application. Now, usually I'll ask why, right? But I didn't ask why. But today, if I would have asked why then, today would have been the answer. to the reason why I didn't get hired. You know, in the city, I ran for city council, police commissioner. I did a whole lot in our city, so there was no reason. But the reason is what the sister up top said here, that we need more people to get involved with the legislation, to get involved with the policies, and that's what I need to do. And for some reason, once again, I don't know what made me get on this Zoom today, but this answered everything for me. So I would love to be able to get in contact and talk to more of the people that's on this Zoom, so I can learn more about how to get involved in the legislation part of it, the policy part of it. So if I put my number in the chat, anybody can call me. I love what you do, Cole, Bilal. I love what you do, man. You know, and y'all are my mentors, believe it or not.
Yeah, so I'm at Emergent Justice. We have lots of work that we're doing on a campaign called Protect Our Youth, where we are calling out these bad tactics, and we believe that it is really important for us to get legislators on board. We have relationships with Donovan McKinney. We have relationships again with Regina Weiss, and we have also had conversations with Chang. And they're really on board. But again, it is always because these topics are not like trending. People don't actually know a lot about what we're talking about when we're talking about interrogation and restraint. These are things that are not, they're very taboo in conversations when talking to legislators as well. So we were at Emergent Justice able to get some money in the budget to address these issues this year. Not a whole lot, but quite a bit. And we will be sitting on a committee that will disseminate this money to end the school to prison pipeline in multiple counties around the state. So that's really, excited about doing this work and moving forward with ending the school to prison to pipeline in Michigan, and need you all's help and help with like getting legislators on board.
Well, I do know it's been that way for at least 50 years, because I'm 52. So when I started going to school, that was it. You know what I'm saying? Our children, I was that child that went from school, group home, straight to prison. I did it. So that opened my eyes up. Here now, I've been home 22 years. 22 years. Now, out of them 22 years, 20 years, I've been doing the work to save our children. You know what I'm saying? But I never came across none of you. So y'all was like my blessing, man. Real talk. But I'm gonna stop talking and so we can move on.
Well, we're so glad you're here. And I just dropped in the link, the bit.ly for the resource page for this group, because part of this is about building those connections. So the folks who are signed on, part of this, we share their directory so that you're like, I got to follow up with Elisheva, or somebody mentioned Liz and what they're doing with Care Brave Safety. It helps you connect with the folks, find the people who are connected, and build those coalitions to make an impact. Cassie just dropped something about seclusion and restraint in the chat as well. We've got about 9 more minutes before we wrap up. Any other questions or comments folks want to share? Either questions for the panel or comments overall.
So, Chuck, I just wanted to encourage people to come back in a month, and we will break up into groups and be able to talk about this even more. So those of you who haven't been with us before, please consider coming back in a month.
Thank you, Katie. And I am going to use that in addition to coming back next month. I also want to ask folks to mark their calendar for the next series. So like we said, we do these in 2-month blocks. So September and October, it's the back to school edition. And then for November and December, our next sequence will be focusing on harm reduction. When we look at things like drug use, like sex work, the traditional response is, oh, we need prohibition, we need police, we need prisons. The problem is that puts it underground. It increases the violence, it increases the risk, and it increases the harm that happens with some of these behaviors. There's another way. It's harm reduction. It's saying, okay, how do we, if you're going to use, how do we make sure that you have access to fentanyl test strips? How do we try to find non-police alternatives to keep people safe? And so one of our partner organizations, Detroit Justice Center, is putting together a statewide convening around harm reduction for November. They're finalizing the date right now. So in partnership with that, we're going to use our November and December series to talk about those alternatives so that we're able to recognize that the key to keeping our community safe, just like the work Bilal's doing with the Boys to Mentors project, it's not about, sometimes there's, well, we have different perspectives if there's a role for police in prisons, but a lot of the solutions are not carceral, they're community-based. And so we'll be diving into those in November and December. Hope you'll all join us.
I would like to address the group if I could.
Please do, John.
With the youth having access to legalized marijuana, I have a son, he's 40 now, but I can look back, his problem started with when it was illegal, and those illegalities that he got caught with and involved with the law have actually followed him actually to this day. A few years back, his record should have been expunged long time ago, but some people pulled it up, some police. And the thing is, he hadn't been incarcerated. He was in a boot camp for 30 days for a long period of time, like your man that's talking. But he's been out here, but back and forth. We had to give probation when they lock him up for something that has to do with a headlight or something. He loses automobiles because he doesn't have insurance. And the youth, even though they aren't locked up, they still have such a hazard. It's easy for them to be homeless or left without any recourse except to do something illegal. And having great grandchildren, I can see this, where it can affect them. And it may have affected my oldest. He's 13 trying to play sports, but he's also has problem with autism to a certain extent. And he may be bipolar, I think. He's not autism, but bipolar is what his problem is. He has to have medication. He's a good boy, but he has to have some help. And Black youth, Black boys, they have a hard time. I just put it that way. But thanks for letting me interject that.
Thank you for that, John.
I love your efforts. And like my man said, we're going in the right way because our future is dependent on how we treat our younger people.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. We've got time for one more question or comment before we break. All right. Well, hearing none, what's coming to mind, some of you know I love quotes, and one of my favorite quotes is from Dr. Seuss' book, The Lorax, where he says, nothing's going to get better. It's not. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, things aren't going to get better. They're not. And I see you here today. You're carrying, we've heard from Cassie, from Cole, from Bilal, and from Elisheva, folks who are at the front lines trying to change things, but you're here because you're part of the solution. You're part of the struggle too. So I'm so grateful for all the work you've done. Please do connect with folks between the sessions. Please do join us next month to deepen the conversation. And please keep doing the amazing work that you're doing to make sure that our schools are places of learning, not punishment, to stop coercive interrogation by police, by administrators, and to support the solutions like the amazing work Bilal's doing with Boys to Mentors that are actually going to help reach and support these kiddos rather than continue to push them on the wrong path. Thank you all.